Laziness is not your problem. Your permission to be lazy, that is the real enemy. Think about that for a second. Every morning you hit that snooze button, you gave yourself permission. Every time you said, "I'll do it later," you gave yourself permission. Every dream you buried under excuses, every goal you quietly abandoned, every version of yourself you never became. Somewhere along the way, you sat down at the table, looked laziness dead in the eye, and you said, "Come in." I have watched brilliant men fall, not to failure, not to hardship, not to the cruel hands of circumstance. I have watched brilliant men fall to their own couch, to their own comfort, to the seductive, suffocating warmth of doing absolutely nothing and calling it rest when it was really retreat. And the saddest part, they did not even know they were losing, because laziness does not announce itself. It does not knock on your door wearing a villain's coat. It comes quietly. It comes as one missed morning, one skipped commitment, one more episode, one more hour, and then one more year, until you look up and an entire decade of your life is gone, and all you have to show for it is a long list of things you were going to do. I refuse to let that be your story, because I know something about you, something you may have forgotten. There is a man inside you who is hungry. There is a version of you that does not negotiate with weakness, does not bargain with comfort, does not flinch when the work gets heavy. That man has been buried under years of delay, years of not yet, years of choosing the path that cost you nothing and gave you nothing in return. But he is not dead. And today, with one rule, just one, we are going to dig him out. Every single day that you choose delay over action, something is being taken from you, not by a person, not by the economy, not by your circumstances. It is being taken by a force so familiar, so comfortable, so deeply embedded in your daily routine that you have stopped recognizing it as the enemy it truly is. Laziness is not a personality flaw. Laziness is not a bad mood. Laziness is not just a rough week or a slow season in your life. Laziness is a thief, and it is the most dangerous kind of thief that exists, because it steals from you with your full cooperation. Think about what a traditional thief takes. He takes your wallet. He takes your car. He takes things that can be replaced, things that can be earned back, things that insurance can cover and time can heal. But laziness takes what can never be returned. It takes your years. It takes the version of yourself you were supposed to become. It takes the business you were supposed to build, the family you were supposed to provide for at a higher level, the impact you were supposed to leave on this world before your time here runs out. And unlike every other thief you will ever encounter in your life, laziness never breaks a window. It never forces a door. It walks right through the front entrance, because you held it open yourself. That is the part that men do not want to sit with. That is the uncomfortable truth that most motivational conversations quietly step around. We want to blame the economy. We want to blame our upbringing. We want to blame the people who did not believe in us, the opportunities that never came, the timing that was never quite right. And sometimes, yes, life is genuinely hard and the cards are genuinely unfair. But even in the middle of all of that, laziness is still making its rounds, still collecting, still reaching into your future and pulling out everything that was meant to be yours. The most painful thing about this kind of theft is that it operates in silence. There is no alarm that sounds when you waste a morning. There is no notification sent to your phone when another week passes and you are no closer to where you said you wanted to be. The cost does not show up immediately. It shows up years later when you are sitting across from a version of your life that feels smaller than what you imagined, wondering how you got there, unable to point to a single dramatic moment where everything went wrong. Because it did not go wrong all at once. It went wrong quietly. It went wrong one postponed decision at a time, one avoided discomfort at a time, one surrendered mourning one abandoned goal, one silenced ambition at a time. And that accumulated loss, that compounded cost of days spent choosing ease over effort, is heavier than any single failure you will ever experience, because you cannot point to it, you cannot explain it neatly, and you cannot explain it neatly, and you cannot shake the feeling that somewhere deep inside, You always knew better. There is a war happening inside you every single day, and most people do not even realize it is being fought. It is not a war between you and your boss, between you and your competitors, between you and the obstacles that life places in your path. It is a war between the part of you that wants to move and the part of you that wants to wait. And the battlefield is that tiny, razor-thin window of time between the moment an idea enters your mind and the moment your brain talks you out of it. That window is where everything is decided. That window is where your future is either built or buried. And the one rule that destroys laziness lives entirely inside that window. Do it before you think. That sounds almost too simple. It sounds like the kind of advice you put on a coffee mug and never actually apply. But stay with me, because underneath the simplicity of those 5 words is a truth so precise, so scientifically and psychologically sound, that the moment you truly understand it, you will never look at hesitation the same way again. Your brain is not always your ally. Your brain is wired for survival, not for greatness. It is wired to conserve energy, avoid risk, and protect you from discomfort. And it is extraordinarily good at its job. The moment you think about doing something hard, your brain begins building a case against it. It starts calculating the effort required, measuring the uncertainty involved, constructing reasons and justifications and perfectly logical excuses for why now is not the right time. And it does all of this in seconds. Before you have even stood up from your chair, your own mind has already written a full argument for why you should sit back down. This is the hesitation loop. This is the invisible machinery that laziness runs on. It does not need much time to operate. It just needs a moment. One moment of pause, 1 second of consideration, one breath of let me think about this, and it moves in, sets up, and takes over. The longer you sit inside that pause, the louder the resistance becomes, the heavier the task feels, and the more convincing the excuses sound. What felt possible at the first spark of motivation begins to feel overwhelming, unrealistic, and exhausting, not because anything actually changed, but because you gave your brain enough time to reframe it. The one rule breaks this cycle at the root. When you train yourself to move at the first signal, before the internal negotiation begins, before the mental committee convenes, before comfort has a chance to cast its vote, you rob laziness of the only thing it needs to survive. You rob it of time, because laziness cannot operate at the speed of immediate action. It is a slow-moving force that depends entirely on your willingness to pause, to deliberate, to wait for the right feeling before you begin. And when you remove that pause, when you close that window by simply moving the moment the thought appears, the entire structure of procrastination collapses because it has nothing left to stand on. This is not about being reckless. This is not about acting without wisdom or charging into decisions without discernment. This is specifically about the small daily moments. The alarm going off in the morning, the task sitting on your list, the call you need to make, the work you need to start, where your brain's resistance is not wisdom. It is just fear dressed in a suit. And in those moments, the man who wins is not the most talented man in the room. He is not the most educated, or the most gifted, or the most naturally disciplined. He is simply the man who learned to move first and think second, who understood that action is not the reward for motivation. Action is the producer of it, and that the feeling you are waiting for before you begin will only ever arrive after you already have. There is something that needs to be said out loud, clearly, and without apology, because too many people are hiding behind a word that does not accurately describe what they are actually experiencing. The word is tired, and it has become one of the most overused, most convenient, most comfortable excuses in the modern vocabulary of the person who is not living up to their own potential. You wake up tired. You come home tired. You sit across from your dreams tired. You postpone, delay, cancel, and withdraw, all in the name of exhaustion. But here is what nobody is telling you, and what you need to hear before another week disappears into the same cycle of fatigue and frustration. In most cases, you are not tired. You are uninspired, and those two things are not even remotely the same. Physical tiredness is real. The man who has worked with his hands all day, who has pushed his body to its limit, who has genuinely spent every ounce of physical energy he possesses, that man is tired. That man has earned his rest. But most of the exhaustion people complain about in their daily lives is not physical at all. It is emotional. It is psychological. It is the deep, heavy, soul-level fatigue that comes not from doing too much, but from spending too much time doing things that mean nothing to you. You can sit at a desk for 8 hours doing work that does not matter to your heart and feel more drained than a man who ran 10 miles. Not because your body is broken, but because your spirit is starving. And a starving spirit will always manufacture the feeling of exhaustion to protect itself from having to continue in a direction that has no meaning. This is why purpose is not a luxury. This is why knowing your why is not a philosophical exercise for people with too much free time. It is a biological necessity. Because when a man is genuinely connected to something that matters, when he has a mission that is larger than his comfort, a vision that is more compelling than his fatigue, a reason that gets him up before the alarm and keeps him going long after everyone else has stopped, exhaustion loses its power over him. You have seen this in your own life if you are honest enough to look. You have had days where you are supposedly too tired to do the things you were supposed to do, and then somehow found a sudden and complete second wind the moment something exciting appeared. The tiredness did not go anywhere. The inspiration arrived, and it made the tiredness irrelevant. That is the truth. Laziness does not want you to discover, because the moment you stop blaming fatigue and start asking yourself the deeper question, the question of whether you are actually pursuing something that ignites you, or simply going through the motions of a life you designed out of obligation and fear, everything changes. The question is no longer, how do I find more energy? The question becomes, how do I find more meaning? And meaning, once found and fully embraced, produces a kind of fuel that no amount of rest could ever manufacture. It burns cleaner, lasts longer, and drives harder than motivation ever could, because it does not depend on how you feel in the morning. It depends on who you have decided to become and what you have decided that becoming is worth. There is a definition of discipline that most people have gotten completely wrong, and that misunderstanding alone is responsible for more abandoned goals, more broken commitments, and more unrealized potential than almost any other misconception a person can carry through their life. Most people think of discipline as punishment. They think of it as restriction. They think of it as the cold, joyless, grinding existence of someone who has sacrificed all pleasure in the name of productivity. Someone who wakes up before dawn not because they love life, but because they hate comfort. And because that image is so unappealing, so harsh, so devoid of warmth and humanity, people push discipline away. They treat it as something extreme, something reserved for athletes and soldiers, and the unusually obsessed. They tell themselves they are not that kind of person. And in doing so, they unknowingly walk away from one of the most profound acts of love a human being can perform. Not love for another person, but love for themselves, because discipline, at its deepest and most honest level, is not punishment. Discipline is self-respect in action. It is the physical, visible, daily expression of the belief that you are worth the effort. Every time you wake up when you said you would, you are telling yourself something. Every time you do the work when you do not feel like it, when the couch is calling and the excuses are ready, and the path of least resistance is wide open and waiting, and you choose the harder thing anyway, you are sending a message to the deepest part of who you are. You are saying without words, with nothing but action, that you believe in your own value enough to invest in it, that you respect your own future enough to protect it, that you take yourself seriously enough to do what you said you were going to do, even when no one is watching and nothing is forcing you, and the only accountability in the room is the quiet voice of your own integrity. Now flip that around, because the opposite is equally true, and far more painful to sit with. Every time you choose laziness over discipline, every time you hit snooze on your alarm and your goals simultaneously, every time you negotiate away your commitments and surrender your standards to the appetite for comfort, you are also sending a message. You are telling yourself, at a level deeper than conscious thought, that you are not worth the effort, that your dreams are not serious enough to protect, that you cannot be trusted, not by the world, not by the people around you, and most devastatingly, not by yourself. And a man who does not trust himself, a man who has broken his own promises so many times that his internal word means nothing, carries a weight that no external success can lift, because he knows, underneath every achievement, underneath every smile, underneath every confident performance for the outside world, he knows that the man in the mirror is someone he has repeatedly let down. This is why discipline is not about the task. It is never really about the task. It is about the relationship you are building with yourself through the consistent, unglamorous, daily act of doing what you committed to do. Every rep completed, every morning honored, every deadline met, every temptation declined is a deposit into the account of your own self-worth. And that account, when it is full, produces something that no motivational speech, no external validation, and no fleeting burst of inspiration can ever replicate. It produces a man who stands in his own presence with confidence, not because the world has applauded him, but because he has shown up for himself so consistently, so faithfully, so relentlessly, that he has become someone he is genuinely proud to be. And that pride, built brick by brick, through the quiet dignity of discipline, is the foundation upon which everything else in a meaningful life is constructed. There is a temptation that lives at the heart of almost every self-improvement journey, and it is a temptation so seductive, so reasonable-sounding, so dressed in the language of ambition, that most people never even recognize it as the trap it truly is. It is the temptation of more systems, more strategies, more morning routines, more productivity frameworks, more lists and planners and color-coded calendars, and 47 habits that promise to transform your life if you can just manage to implement all of them simultaneously, while somehow also maintaining your sanity. People consume information about change at a rate that has never been seen before in human history. Podcasts, books, seminars, courses, videos, and yet the gap between knowing and doing has never been wider. Because the problem was never a shortage of information. The problem is that complexity is the enemy of execution, and most people have buried the simple, powerful, life-changing act of beginning under an avalanche of preparation that never ends. You do not need 100 habits. You need one rule, practiced daily, without negotiation, without exception, without waiting for the perfect conditions that will never arrive. And if you can give that one rule the consistency it demands, it will do something to you that no collection of strategies ever could. It will rewire you, not metaphorically, not as a motivational figure of speech designed to make you feel good for 20 minutes before you go back to your old patterns. Literally, neurologically, at the level of how your brain is physically structured and how it processes every decision you make from the moment you wake up to the moment you close your eyes at night. Because the brain does not distinguish between a big habit and a small one. It does not award extra points for complexity or ambition. It simply responds to repetition. And every time you perform the same action in response to the same trigger, the neural pathway associated with that action grows stronger, faster, and more automatic, until what once required enormous willpower requires almost none at all. This is the science behind why one rule, repeated relentlessly, carries more transformative power than a dozen rules practiced inconsistently. Consistency is not just a motivational virtue, it is a biological mechanism. It is the process by which deliberate choices become default behavior, by which effort becomes ease, by which the man who once had to fight himself every morning to do the right thing becomes the man for whom doing the right thing is simply who he is. And that shift, that transition from discipline as a daily battle to discipline as a permanent identity, does not happen through intensity. It does not happen through the dramatic all-or-nothing overhauls that people attempt every January and abandon every February. It happens through the quiet, unsexy, profoundly powerful act of showing up for one thing every single day and refusing to let any excuse, any mood, any inconvenience, or any competing priority talk you out of it. The other thing that one practiced rule does, and this is the part that surprises people most when they experience it for themselves, is that it does not stay contained to the area of life where you first applied it. Discipline is not departmental. When you build the habit of honoring one commitment to yourself with absolute consistency, that energy bleeds. It spreads. It moves from your mornings into your work, from your work into your relationships, from your relationships into your finances, from your finances into your health. Because what you are really building underneath a specific rule itself is a self-concept. You are building the identity of a person who does what they say, who follows through on what they start, who can be counted on by the most important person in their life, which is themselves. And once that identity takes root, once you genuinely begin to see yourself as someone who does not quit, who does not negotiate with weakness, who does not abandon the standard they have set, every area of your life begins to reorganize itself around that new truth, because the man has changed, and a changed man cannot produce an unchanged life.